This is CXO Secrets, the podcast that takes you inside the mind of business leaders and reveals the strategies behind their success. Coming up in today's show,
legacy applications, they're very expensive to operate. They're not set up for cloud operation. In a lot of cases, there's a promise of savings, and old applications are just ported directly over to cloud and operate the way they are today. So there's a lot of room for improving efficiency in IT operations today, from a cost optimization, from a network architecture, application architecture standpoint. Even just measuring return on investments is a challenge in a lot of cases, but can be done successfully. So I think the biggest key is to fail faster and recover. So one thing I've always talked to my staff about is, if you're moving at 100% and you make mistakes, that's okay. If you're working half speed and you make mistakes, it's not okay. And I also told my folks, it's okay for you not to know the answer once. When I ask a question or one of my seniors asks a question, it's not okay to say I don't know twice. So be inquisitive, be energetic, go learn as much as you can, and continue learning every day.
CXO Secrets is powered by EDS, going beyond connections. Find out about upcoming C-level events, experiences, and insights at edsxevents.com. Dave Hoon, CTO at Norseman, thank you for joining us on CXO Secrets.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me a bit about what you do, and tell me a bit about what Norseman does, first of all.
So Norseman is a value-added reseller and solution provider that started supporting the federal government in the United States. We've been in business about 32 years. We're a small business supporting Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and federal civilian agencies. Just recently, within the last 2 years, we've opened a commercial and healthcare team as well. Myself personally, I have 20 years directly supporting as an employee and contractor the Department of Defense in the United States, primarily from a cybersecurity and network operations background. And for the last 10 years, I've been at Norseman, and half of that time as CTO. Prior to that, I was a director of accounts.
CTO, like you say, is where you're at now, and thanks for giving us the background on Norseman too. And aligning with that today, our focus in particular is on IT efficiency, and in particular in the government administration space, in which, Dave, you say you have a lot of experience. I think we should address the upfront kind of elephant in the room here, because government efficiency, fair to say, has been very much part of the news cycle over in the US over the last few months. But in reality, I don't think there's a country or indeed a company where efficiency isn't at the top of the agenda right now. I think that's fair to say.
I would agree with that. So the government has a lot of monolithic legacy applications. They're very expensive to operate. They're not set up for cloud operation. In a lot of cases, there's a promise of savings, and old applications are just ported directly over to cloud and operate the way they are today. So there's a lot of room for improving efficiency in IT operations today, from a cost optimization, from a network architecture, application architecture standpoint. Even just measuring return on investments is a challenge in a lot of cases, but can be done successfully.
Yeah, and this isn't a politics podcast. There are plenty of those, trust me. But like you, I've also worked back in my enterprise IT days in central government over here in the UK. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of monoliths there. There's a lot of legacy as well. And during, I guess, a first wave of maybe cloud enablement, you're absolutely right. Cloud enablement for some applications was literally no longer having that spreadsheet or whatever it was that was stored, that was being file served from a computer in a basement somewhere and moving that up to some cloud storage instead. I guess that was one form of cloud enablement, but that isn't efficient. There are many more efficiencies that the platforms that the cloud enables, that all kinds of digital SaaSes enable that, enables more efficiency. And that's the kind of low-hanging fruit that particularly in the government space, particularly in the federal administration space, that I guess it's a real opportunity is what I'm getting at there, and that's the opportunity that you see there too, and that you support your clients with at Norseman.
Indeed, a lot of what we see, as you mentioned, just moving applications as they're architected today into the cloud. They're not being optimized for microservices or service-enabled architectures. Cybersecurity is not being optimized for the cloud. A lot of the promise for cloud operations is cost reduction, but in reality, when you move legacy applications, you still have the same operation requirements. You may lose some of the responsibility for hosting and managing your own hardware, but you still have the same operational requirements until you can implement things like infrastructure as cloud and service-enabled or service management ITIL-based processes that can automate and optimize IT operations.
Now, some of our listeners will be very familiar with how things operate in government administration, public sector, but there will be others who listen who I know whose primary experience has been in the commercial domain or the private sector. So how do you articulate the main differences between the private sector, the public sector, the administration, the government sector, and the commercial sector? How do you talk about the differences between the two from an IT point of view?
So from my standpoint, I think some of the biggest differences are between commercial and government. Commercial, in my opinion, focuses a lot more on cost. They're measuring success in terms of revenue and profit. In the government, they measure success in the terms of data protection and mission delivery. So architecting applications that can lower cost in the government and enable them to move money to the mission, whether that be defense or supporting taxpayers or infrastructure in the country. There's really a difference in the way you measure the return on your investment and success. So, but we're trying to get the government to think more in terms of, a commercial mindset of revenue and profit. And if you can increase, your profit, you're essentially saving money that can be moved to other projects or programs.
And there's something there, you kind of mentioned it, about the breadth of the mission, the kind of scope of the mission as well. And, if you are operating in the commercial sector, it might be that your mission is to sell more widgets and to make those widgets as efficiently as possible and to sell for as much markup as possible and deliver shareholder value. But when you start looking at federal systems, at government systems, it's a very different kind of scope of mission. It's not just widgets, it's entire cities, states worth of services, isn't it?
It sure is. And lives. So my background with Department of Defense, we did everything for the, quote, the warfighter. So the soldier on the ground, the person on the ground that is putting their lives in danger to protect, our interests in the United States. Everything we did was to protect data, protect mission, protect the warfighter first and foremost. So completely different kind of focus from a solutioning standpoint and capability delivery than just profit and shareholder performance.
It's difficult sometimes to put a value on data when it's not about a top or bottom line, but when it's lives like that, when it's life and death data. And we've spoken on this podcast before about transformation projects in healthcare settings as well. Again, it's impossible to put a value on that data. Needless to say, it's incredibly high value and important that it is managed efficiently, and also not only efficiently, but also with resilience and security. And when we're talking about transformation programs, stuff changing, those need to be handled incredibly sensitively and with a lot of security in mind. Now, In terms of efficiency, then, where do you see the main opportunities for efficiency in federal administration there? Because, like you say, that it's such a big picture. Where do you start? Where are the low-hanging fruit, would you say?
So I think probably the low-hanging fruit is really looking at infrastructure, looking at your data, trying to assign value to your data in some way that determines whether you want, full cloud implementation or a hybrid, a combination of customer-owned and commercial cloud services. We also see, efficiencies in application modernization. So moving away from the traditional 3-layer application stack and into a services architecture, putting data first, putting events first, API-driven applications and data-driven applications are really some of the lowest hanging fruit in my mind.
And in terms of the bigger picture there's also, frankly, the amount of human effort that goes into, when you think about administration, you think about lots of pieces of paper, lots of photocopies of bits of paper and lots of signatures being required. What is there in terms of the human, the manual, the repetitive processes that, if there is investment into modernizing those processes, there can be some real efficiencies driven there? I guess this is digital transformation in a sense.
Sure. Yeah. It sure is. And you're right, there is a lot of paperwork still, manual process in the government. So, implementing automated workflows and automations in terms of service delivery is important. Creating, applications that are delivered quicker through zero code or no code application environments could save a lot of money in the government, could speed up delivery. Implementing CI/CD pipelines, so continuous integration and delivery of applications is important. Being able to deliver secure applications faster to the environment will increase efficiencies as well.
Yeah, and you're going towards the kind of development side and really into the weeds of the tech there, the code checking, the security compliance, the risk management. We've spoken on here before about DevSecOps and shifting left. All of that kind of, there's a lot of automation potential in there that not only speeds up the initial part of the workflow, but it makes stuff more secure. So you aren't having to fix stuff. You're not needing to invest so much time as you continue to iterate on that code and develop later on. And then in terms of the cloud, we've mentioned it a couple of times here. Again, there are maybe some differences with regards to how in the commercial sector one might think about, we don't have anything on premise anymore. We've got rid of all of our data centers. Everything's living in the cloud now. There are some additional considerations when you're looking at governmental type data, are there not?
There certainly are, and primarily from a cybersecurity perspective, also from a network data protection. So the federal government has several different domains of data protection, some that are internet accessible, some that are not, or most that are not. So not everything can move to a true commercial, quote, commercial cloud. In a lot of cases, service providers like Microsoft, Amazon, Google have government platforms of their cloud services delivered, but they're not the full-blown platform in a lot of cases, which limits some of the capabilities for the government to even move into those government environments in the cloud. For instance, there could be services that aren't accessible for messaging in Amazon, for example. That would prevent, some of the modern applications from working the way they were designed. So, there are challenges there. But I would primarily say number one challenge is going to be cybersecurity and data protection, and making sure all the information is going to be protected and that there's a solid boundary or access control policies around that environment.
So those are certainly some of the areas, like we say, where there is opportunity there. If it was as simple as talking about it, then of course it would be a lot easier to implement. But there is friction. There are challenges where in any transformation, and particularly in the space that we're talking about today, in the governmental space. What are the biggest frictions? What are the biggest challenges on the kind of efficiency and transformation journeys that we're talking about? Are they technical, for example, or do they fall elsewhere in the three-legged, four-legged stool?
I think they fall elsewhere. So government organizations have, great technical resources, a lot of young talent, and a lot of folks that have been around the government know where, everything is buried, so to speak. But I think, it comes down to acquisition processes in a lot of cases, or, legacy acquisition process slows things down compared to commercial environments. A lot of times, an acquisition that takes a year and a half or 2 years to put into place, sometimes by the time the acquisition goes through, technology has already moved on, or services have changed. So there's a lot of challenge there. But yeah, just red tape in general. If we can streamline some of the roadblocks and remove those roadblocks and let engineers be engineers and managers make decisions directly, we could certainly speed things up and move things along quicker. And I also think, from a federal government, the organizations are so large. There's so many agencies and other organizations trying to get to a common architecture, common data model, common visibility across information that's available is probably one of the bigger challenges as well.
Obviously, again, making comparisons with the commercial sector here, there are some sectors that, for very good reasons, regulatory reasons perhaps, have a lower risk tolerance. If you're looking in financial services or maybe pharmaceutical, for example, risk management is very, very high on the agenda there, and things can have a different cadence to if you're working in fast-moving consumer goods or, in technology services and goods as well. Is there anything about risk management, about the speed and just the way that governments think about managing risk, how conservative, little c, they might be, that also slows things down? Or has that not been so much of a problem in your experience?
No, I lump risk management into cybersecurity. So from a risk acceptance officer in the government, they have a lot of responsibility and authority. So, they're obviously thinking about the end user, the mission first. And in a lot of cases, when we look at cloud services, we look at software as a service, those commercial organizations aren't exactly forthcoming with all of their protections. They're able to provide artifacts of protection, but maybe not the details around it because it's proprietary in some cases. So it definitely slows things down because from a testing and validation verification standpoint, there's a lot more that has to go into it. In a lot of cases, moving sensitive data or, data that could put a user at risk or expose data for a taxpayer, for example.
So in terms of the journey, in terms of where we're heading to, there's lots of ways. I hate this saying, but it's just the one that occurs to me right now. There's lots of ways to skin a cat here, and I love cats. Where does managed services play in this area, particularly around governmental? What's the attitude and the how much of that do you tend to see in this federal administration space? So
managed services has always been, a big piece of federal IT delivery. Federal service integrators have been around since IT's been around. But from a cloud services perspective, we're seeing different contracting models for managed services today. So when we look at, moving something into one of the large commercial clouds or, something into a hybrid utility-based cloud like a Dell Apex, for example, we're seeing managed services packaged around that. As I mentioned earlier, organizations were promised big savings moving to the clouds, but then they had to train their service integrators on how to manage in those environments. So we're seeing contracts now and services packaged together as a managed service that looks at hybrid cloud and best platform capabilities, where it may still be on premise, it may be in a co-located data center, or that's co-located cloud adjacent, or it may be in a cloud directly with services built around that application or mission delivery.
And is there anything about working with a managed services partner that can speed up the movement away from legacy systems? I think back to all of the big relational databases when I first started out in the mid to late 90s, these things were huge. And some of them I know are still kicking around on some very, very creaky old hardware there now. And I'm sure that, these companies would love to get off of that. Is there a way that working with a managed services partner can facilitate that journey?
Most definitely. So managed services partners bring the expertise. I mean, their business models are delivering capabilities quickly and efficiently. They're built to make a profit. So, they bring expertise that can do things faster than the federal government or, Department of Defense. What we like to see are engineers at, our customer, being the federal government, focused on their mission and delivery of data and information and workflow in an application or an environment, and then bring the mission partner being the managed service provider or a federal service integrator partner to the table that brings the expertise to implement and operate that environment quickly. And to make recommendations and transform, as technology is developed or released.
Dave, it strikes me that we've not spoken too much about the two-letter elephant in the room. We've been speaking about automation and operational efficiency, and we haven't really lent into AI in any meaningful way yet. But it strikes me that, in this space in particular, given the journey that many of us are still on with AI, whether that's agentic AI, generative AI, or kind of traditional machine learning AI, deep learning, and so on, there may be some friction, there may be some resistance, because it's a question of trust, it's a question of reliability. Many people are concerned about the hallucinogenic aspects of using some forms of AI right now, but you can't deny that there's an awful lot of opportunity for efficiency that is in whichever form of AI you choose to apply is AI driven, right?
Yes, I realize I haven't said AI, and that's on purpose. So I'm a big fan of using AI personally, on my desktop for personal services. I think it has its place from an AI assistance background today. But you hit the nail on the head. I think there's still a trust issue when it comes to operating or managing or configuring network and application environments. I think it makes sense in specific cases for AI to be implemented directly within applications. But from an IT efficiency standpoint, not a mission efficiency standpoint, but IT efficiency, there's a place for AI assistance, in my opinion, but not AI management or automated decision making based on artificial intelligence or trained models. Primarily from us because of cybersecurity. So we have very sophisticated state-sponsored and other organization-sponsored organizations that are developing 0 days and attacks that we haven't seen before. And if we don't have, training on that specifically, it's going to slip through. So we still need experts, being the human in the loop, making those decisions and managing those environments.
You mentioned that you get some good use out of AI. I'm sure there's a LLM or two that's thrown in there. Many of those are, I guess, cloud services. But when we start looking at how organizations, whether you are a private or a public entity, looking to benefit from what an LLM can bring you in terms of an easy access conversational interface with a huge volume of finely tuned data. What are some of the ways that you are seeing LLMs being deployed in safe and secure ways, even in corporate or governmental settings?
So, for example, Norseman, we have a product called Odin's Edge, which you can find information at odinsedge.ai, where we can implement a private LLM trained on documentation and knowledge locally in your own environment. And I think solutions like that can be used to fix some of the processes that I identified earlier that are broken around acquisition, being able to speed up acquisition, documentation, all the common, information that goes into normal, repeatable business workflows can benefit from generative LLM private deployments. I think that's where we're seeing, some of the most interest today. We also see a lot from a physical facilities management with vision AI and detecting threats. When we work with customers like border protection or even Department of Defense and physical security at bases or camps, there's a lot that can be done to alleviate manual security operations with cameras and vision-based AI.
Yeah, I've been having a number of conversations only this week around live and retrospective AI or machine learning face recognition systems being used by, for example, retailers as well as law enforcement as well. And I guess that's one of those examples of where there's a difficult line that sometimes needs to be trodden between enabling a more secure government, enabling security in retail premises or whatever it is, and also one's privacy, one's civil liberties as well. I don't know. That's again, there's a whole other podcast devoted to that stuff. But there are some really fascinating conversations, and particularly when we're talking about a governmental context here, I guess it's fair game to mention that. Listen, we're kind of running towards our time for today, but absolutely fascinating to chat about efficiency, about the opportunities that there are for efficiency, particularly when it comes to governmental environments. And I think a lot of the things that we've spoken to, while absolutely laser focused on the environments in which you work, federal government, for example, there's a lot of applicability in private sector, in commercial as well. I know that you and I are going to be chatting again at some point in the future around event-based systems, around, hey, edge. Everyone's moving to the edge at the moment, but we'll press pause on that for now. But Dave, before I let you go, there are some things that we ask all of our guests on the show. The show's called CXO Secrets. So I have to ask, although maybe given some of your employment history, you can't tell us too much, but what is your secret? If you put your modesty to one side just for a moment, tell us what key attribute about you that you believe has enabled you to get to where you are and do the things you do today.
So I think the biggest key is to fail faster and recover. So one thing I've always talked to my staff about is, if you're moving at 100% and you make mistakes, that's okay. If you're working half speed and you make mistakes, it's not okay. And I also told my folks, it's okay for you not to know the answer once. When I ask a question or one of my seniors asks a question, it's not okay to say I don't know twice. So if be inquisitive, be energetic, go learn as much as you can, and continue learning every day.
I feel like I've learned a lot today already. We also do a Pass the Question here on the show, where you get to put a question to a future guest, whoever they may be. But before that, we have a question for you from a previous guest. This is from Darren Humphreys, Group CISO and CTO Partner at Acora, and they ask this question.
What are some of the biggest innovation and how it's enabled culture within your business to succeed?
That's a great question. So within our organization, within Norseman, our culture as a small business, we're, I'd like to say, very family focused. So we put our employees first. We make sure everybody can take care of their family, whether that's their own personal health, their children, their spouse's health, and we support them. We're there from a teammate perspective. We can call on anybody in our organization to help, and we're willing to do that for each other. And as we move forward, we specifically look for new employees that we know will fit into our culture. We've turned down some excellent candidates for employment simply because of their attitude, me first attitude, as opposed to an employee or a organization first attitude.
You know what, Dave? Culture is one of those words that gets thrown around an awful lot in podcasts and in webinars and all kinds of things. But I tell you this, and I'm sure you would agree, when you go somewhere, when you work in a company, or when you spend time with employees, with workforce from a company that's got a good culture, it hits you in the face. You absolutely know that there's a solid culture there where people are looking out for one another. And that's the point for me at which culture stops being this kind of fluffy thing and it becomes so tangible. And from how you describe what you have at Norseman, it sounds like that's something that you have all been working, and it is a team effort to nurture culture, but it's something that you've all been working towards very, very hard. And you're really, really fortunate.
Yes. Yeah, I feel lucky. So we always say it's not going to be your first job, but we expect it to be your last.
Oh, it's great. It's great. I love that.
Yeah.
Finally, Dave, what question do you have that you'd like me to put to a future guest on this show?
I would like to know some of the more unique implementations of AI that are being considered within your organization, apart from generative or agentic AI. What specific problems are you looking to solve using artificial intelligence?
That's a great question. Can't wait to hear the answer for that. Dave, thank you so much for chatting to us today. And if people want to find out more about your company, Norseman, about what it does and how it does it, where's the best place to reach out? Norseman.com
or odinsedge.ai.
We'll also include a link to those in the description for this podcast. But for now, Dave Hoon, thank you so much for joining us on CXO Secrets.
Thank you for having me, David. I appreciate it.